My Slippers. I got to explain this to you. They are exclusive 3-tier cushioning system. It's like walking on clouds, right? We took the My Pillow patented foam, the one that you know and love, and they created a solid layer to provide incredible comfort. Don't forget to use the promo code Carter, CARTER, and you will receive 40% off of your My Slippers. Your whole family's going to love it.
This episode of the Sara Carter Podcast is sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Never forget, join the Tunnel to Towers Foundation on its mission to do good in honor of America's heroes. Donate $11 a month at t2t.org. That's T2t.org.
American forces are finally leaving the longest war, Afghanistan. We are heading back home and leaving that ancient land behind. But guess what? A lot of us, a good majority of us who spent time in Afghanistan like me, and those who fought the war like my husband, and the Afghan troops and soldiers who fought alongside U.S. forces, as well as the interpreters, will be haunted by those ghosts in Afghanistan for the rest of their lives. Afghanistan, you can walk away from it, but it never really truly leaves you. And I'll explain that in this episode on the Sara Carter Show. It's a very personal show for me. It means, I guess, it's a love-hate relationship, as my husband and I like to describe Afghanistan. That's where we met. But it's also a place that changed our world forever. After September 11th, with Al-Qaeda, launching a strike against the United States like we hadn't seen since Pearl Harbor, and dragging us into a world that so many of our young soldiers and so many of our troops were unfamiliar with. And it just changed everything. I think it changed everything for everyone. It's actually fundamentally changed our nation as well. And I agree. I was talking to one of the producers on the show, Rich, about this. And, I agree with him that there have been fundamental changes since that strike on September 11th at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and all those that lost their lives on those flights, even the one in Pennsylvania. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Afghanistan. I'm going to take you there, take you to the place where I met the most amazing man in my life, where my whole life was fundamentally changed. And I'm going to play some clips from Scotty Miller. Actually, he's, in charge with Afghanistan, General Scotty Miller, somebody who I have a great deal of respect for. He did an incredible interview with the BBC, and as well as play some other clips for you guys regarding what this means as we pull out. And I have a few choice words for the Taliban in this episode, so you don't want to miss it. But before we get there, I want you to go to SaraCarter.com. If you got your phone on you, just go there. Go to SaraCarter.com. And while you are there, please sign up for our email list. This way, you don't get shadow banned from the stories that are most important. I want to be able to reach you as well. And the only way we're going to be able to do this is if we stay in communication with one another. I see your emails all the time. I think it's fabulous. For those of you who follow me on Rumble, I get your messages. I see them in my email chain and I read them. It's so important for me to stay in communication with you. It's just that important. We're one America. Despite what the leftist Marxists are trying to do to us right now, we are one nation, and we've got to stick together, and we've got to reinforce that American liberty and freedom and what that means. And that means we've got to be listening to one another and not letting these social media tech leftists stop us from speaking the truth and taking away our First Amendment rights. So please go to SaraCarter.com. You'll get all my social media connections there, as well as the email. Let's start with AMAC, though. AMAC is a sponsor of this show because guess what? They stand for American values. They are the Association of Mature American Citizens. They are fighting that good fight against reckless government spending and the ever-expanding scope of the federal government. They help small businesses. They believe in secure borders. They support our military and respect our veterans. That's what this show today is all about. It is about the sacrifices that have been made, about the connections that we made with one another. And that's what's important. Not forgetting what our soldiers have given. They have given everything, folks, everything and then some. Let's remember our veterans today. By joining AMAC, you are taking the first steps to saving the America you love. AMAC offers an alternative to just about every benefit that AARP offers, but without that liberal agenda. I stand with AMAC, and I hope that you will too. I encourage you to join today at amac.us/Carter. That's amac.us/Carter. The benefits of membership are great, but the cause is even greater. Join today at amac.us/Carter. I want to take you to my very first trip to Afghanistan for just one moment. It was, I believe, early 2008, late 2007. I was coming in on this C-130 over the Hindu Kush, and it was early morning. The sun was barely rising, and the mountains below. I remember walking up to the pilot. I was looking out the window, and I could see the snow-covered tops of the mountains, and the jagged edges, and the sun, which was like an orangey yellow, peeking over the horizon, and looking down at this ancient land and thinking to myself, wow, it's extraordinary. It's beautiful. It's dangerous. I mean, I got to tell you, I was a little afraid. I mean, you're looking down at these incredible mountains, and it's just such a vast land. And it's not like when you're in the United States, or when you're in Europe where you see, beautiful buildings and it's modern society. This is like walking 2,000 years into the past. In some areas, people in villages have no communication with the outside world. They don't understand, the same basic, I guess, amenities that we have now that we take for granted are just unknown to them. They live in villages, they grow their food, they harvest their food, they go to the well to get water, they bring it back. They have their own customs, their own history, and it's very disconnected from the modern Western world. Very disconnected. I was very blessed that during my time in Afghanistan, all those years that I covered the war there, back and forth, I think up until the last time was 2013 that I went back, or 2014, was the last time I was in Afghanistan. I think that it just changed my life, the way I viewed the rest of the world. It's where I met my husband. I have many Afghan friends from being there. I love the Afghan food. I respect, a lot of the Afghan culture, which is very tribal. It reminded me sometimes a little bit of our own democracy, in their tribes, the way they handle things and the way they deal with things, but on a very rudimentary level. But I have a love-hate with Afghanistan, right? It was there that my husband lost his eyesight, that we've lost great, good friends. It was there that I watched young men give their lives. And in one particular instance that affected me deeply, deeply affected me. I remember flying back. I was with the PJs. We were parajumpers, and my friend Mary Calvert was with me. She's a phenomenal photographer, just brilliant. MaryFCalvert.com. You got to go see her website because she's done extraordinary work covering not just the Afghan war, but sensitive issues all over our planet. I mean, she's just done an amazing amount of journalism, and I respect her wholeheartedly. We were there together, and we were with the parajumpers, and it was a really bloody, deadly year. It was a really deadly year. Our men were dying in Arghandab Valley. There was a lot of attacks on our striker divisions. These vehicles would flip over. People would get trapped inside. They would burn alive, some of them. Some of our soldiers. The Afghans were targeting us with bigger and badder IEDs, vis-a-vis from Iranian training from the IRGC. Yes, the Iranians were very involved in training the Taliban against U.S. forces. And they were an enemy too, a hidden enemy that was very good and very adept at doing this. And Mary and I were on this flight with the parajumpers. We were just going to do this like kind of run with them. We were up in these Black Hawks that had been retrofitted into like medical, right, helicopters. So for rescue purposes. And it was just awesome. I mean, I remember sitting on the edge of the helicopter. We were in Kandahar. We were flying over. Mary was in a separate helicopter. I was in one. They had me hooked up to my back, and my legs were hanging out. And we were just scooping in and out over this incredible landscape in Kandahar. I remember thinking that the desert looked red, almost like the Navajo desert, when it was just so beautiful out in Arizona. And I looked out at the vast, I guess, plains of like Afghanistan, right? You could see kids playing soccer here and there. Seemed like a really just great day, right? Like nothing was going to happen. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there was this emergency call that one of our units had been hit. A Humvee had been hit. There were wounded. There were dead. I mean, these paratroopers just changed. I mean, I guess you would call them pararescue workers. They just immediately went right into high gear. Everybody was focused on the rescue and on fighting the Taliban that were still there, targeting this unit. And we flew right into it. And I'll never forget thinking to myself as these men were rushing to get, the wounded and to collect the dead to bring them home. I'll never forget just that moment where everything inside me sunk, where I realized when I looked out of that helicopter and I said, somebody's child is coming on board with me for the last time. This was the last place that they ever saw Afghanistan. The big thing about this monologue for me is the sacrifices of those who served, the wounded, the dead, and those who returned home. And remember, some were returned home. They were returned home in a coffin with an American flag draped over their coffin. And it was one that always had flown over Afghanistan by our troops, which was pretty incredible. And they would put that flag over the coffin and send it home to their families. Big sacrifices. Why? Because our young men and women, a great generation of them, absolutely all voluntary service, not forced to serve, volunteered to serve their nation overseas, absolutely wanted to defend this nation, defend its liberty, defend its freedom, and were willing to do so with their life. With their life. And their families pay the ever-enduring price of that. They're gone forever. And I remember getting on that helicopter with them. And I remember those that were wounded. And I remember flying into Bagram. Oh my gosh, Bagram Air Base, which was literally looted within hours of our soldiers leaving this weekend. Remember they just left, was looted. And there are vehicles left behind, hundreds of vehicles left behind without any keys. It's like a ghost town. Remember at the beginning, I said it's like we're haunted, right? Those of us who have been there. We really are haunted. Lots of lives lost. Lots of Afghan lives lost too. Lots of people just forever haunting that region of the world. They say it's the place where empires go to die. That's what the Afghans like to say too, right? I mean, that's like the old saying about Afghanistan. It's a place where empires go to die. The British, Kabul, the passes. I remember even going down into some of those passes myself and wondering if somebody above me, would have a gun on us or, launch a mortar at us when we were walking through those passes in Afghanistan with the soldiers and with our troops. I was there with Marines as well, not just the Army, and with the Air Force, and even the Navy had people serving in Afghanistan. But I want you to think about 20 years and how that's affected our nation and how that's affected those who've given so much. And I want you to think about this July 4th. Let me play a clip. This is President Biden saying it's time for American troops to come home. Listen to this.
I'm now the fourth United States president to preside over American troop presence in Afghanistan. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. I will not pass this responsibility on to a 5th. After consulting closely with our allies and partners, with our military leaders and intelligence personnel, with our diplomats and our development experts, with the Congress and the Vice President, as well as with Mr. Ghani and many others around the world, I've concluded that it's time to end America's longest war. It's time for American troops to come home.
It is. It is time for American troops to come home, but at what price? And what price have we paid for the last 20 years? And why have we been there for 20 years? And did we learn any lessons from those 20 years? So many sacrifices made. So many sacrifices made. And I'm still trying to figure out, what and why and how. And did we learn our lessons from, they always talked about lessons learned in Afghanistan. Lessons learned, lessons learned. I would be the reporter that would come back all the time with the bad news. I remember there would be so many congressional hearings, House Armed Services Committee, Senate Armed Services Committee. They would hold these hearings and we'd hear Petraeus and, McChrystal and all the other leaders that had been there, McKiernan, say, oh, we're this close to winning. We're so close to winning. We're right there. We've won. And I would come back and say, that's not true. We haven't. I would get on Fox and say it, our soldiers don't know and our Marines don't know whether to, whether they're building a school or fighting the Taliban, whether they are asked to be a part of a reconstruction project or if they're going after Al Qaeda. They don't know their role. They just didn't know. And even when we tried to rebuild, this ancient land the way we thought it should be built, and implementing the type of policies we thought needed to be implemented, it would always backfire on us. It was like nobody was listening to anybody. And the amount of money we were dumping into Afghanistan was just crazy. Crazy, because there was no accountability for the hundreds of billions of dollars that were going into the country. But the one thing that we all knew was true, the one thing that we did know was true, was the fact that we were there because we knew there was an enemy. We knew Al Qaeda, the Taliban, those other groups, Islamic State later on, and every other wild, crazy, extremist, radical group that wants to bring down the Western world would do so if they could. And they would find places for safe haven, like, Afghanistan or Pakistan. They would find a way to do it. We knew that. So we knew there was an enemy, but we didn't know how to fight this war. Our leadership was not as vested in it. Right? It's a lot different when you're running the war from Washington, D.C. than when you're the kid on the ground, right? Who's 18 years old and has never seen, for crying out loud, this country before, which is so different, One in which, believe me, I saw with my own eyes, the majority of our soldiers were passing out cookies to the Afghan children, were hanging out with their Afghan counterparts, would bring home balls, soccer balls, toys, those little stuffed animals. I remember they would pass them out, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to, because they wanted to give something back, because they really, our soldiers, our American fighters, our war fighters, our troops are some of the best people on the planet. No doubt. No doubt. They made ultimate sacrifices, and I don't want us to forget that. And I want those sacrifices to mean something. I really do. I really do. Here's a good friend of mine. He's Congressman Michael Waltz. This is him saying that the troop withdrawal is asinine. And this is his argument as to why we should not withdraw.
On Bagram Air Base, Martha, this policy is just asinine. It doesn't make sense. This one air base, if you look at where it's located, from that base, our drones and special forces can go after half the world's terrorist organizations that still exist in the Afghan-Pakistani border region. But it's also sandwiched between China, Russia, and Iran. In that one base, we can reach out and affect the battlefield for 4 out of our 5 major adversaries that's in the national security strategy, basically all of our enemies except North Korea, out of that one base.
And he's right. And he's absolutely right about that base being that important, about that region of the world being important. Congressman Waltz knows. I mean, he's a soldier. He understands this, and he's an intelligence expert. And this is what made it so complicated. So my idea is like, what platform are we going to have now? How are we going to have, eyes on the ground? This is what we were missing. Remember before September 11th? Remember that? Remember the September 11th commission? One of the big problems we had in our nation was our intelligence apparatus, which had been dismantled, as well as our military to some extent, especially after the fall of the Soviet Union. Once the Soviet Union was broken up, folks, the Clinton administration, they were just like, yeah, we don't need to put money into that. Well, we don't need to put money into that. Let's not put money in that. Let's put money into this. So it's really easy to kind of walk away from something and say, yeah, it's over, wrap it up in a bow and throw it on the side and hope that nobody holds you accountable for it any longer. Right? Like, oh my gosh, I hope we don't have to hear those soldiers, anymore. That brings us right back home. But I want you to think about those sacrifices that were made. And I want you to think about what Michael Waltz is saying here. What platform will we have to monitor what's going on? It's really easy to forget about September 11th. It's really easy to forget about Bataclan. It's real easy to forget about the attacks in Spain on the train. It's real easy to forget about all those attacks that happened in Great Britain, right? And we've had to deal with COVID over the last year. But believe me, our enemies have not forgotten. And what happened on September 11th was a failure of intelligence. Because everybody knew Al-Qaeda wanted to attack the United States one way or another. There was even a leak of Project Bojinka. You guys probably look it up. Look it up. They found all these documents in the Philippines, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. And they, being the Philippine government, actually shared it with the United States. It was a plan by Al-Qaeda to blow up planes in mid-flight in the sky. And that was before September 11th. They had already thought of using commercial airliners as a weapon, and we still missed it. So I think what Michael Waltz is saying is like, look, we have adversaries in the world. We still have a lot of adversaries. What are we going to do now? We've given up Bagram Airfield. And when I come back, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Bagram Airfield. And I'm also going to play some clips from the BBC, an interview with General Scotty Miller. I think it's so important that you listen to that. But before I get there, I want to talk to you about Tunnel to Towers Foundation. And that's what I was just talking about, September 11th. Tunnel to Towers Foundation has not forgot about the sacrifices made by our first responders, right? Those are the people that carry forward the legacy and courage and heroism of our nation. For the 20th anniversary of 9/11 this year, Tunnel to Towers is helping actually America's heroes and their families with 200, listen to this, 200 mortgage-free homes, bringing stability to Gold Star and fallen first responder families with young children, and smart homes to our nation's most catastrophically injured veterans and first responders. It's so important that they are remembered and that they are taken care of, because they were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. In honor of the fallen, the foundation's chairman and CEO, Frank Siller, he's embarking on the Never Forget Walk, more than 500 miles through 6 states in 42 days. I'm actually going to be joining him at the end of his walk with my husband. So I hope you're paying attention to this. Listen to this. Starting at the Pentagon on August 1st through Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and then it's going to culminate at Ground Zero on 9/11, where I'm going to meet Frank Siller, who is just one of my heroes, right? Towers of Light, for the first time, those we lost to 9/11 related illnesses are also being honored at the ceremony on September 12th, 9/12. And on Veterans Day, and another first, the soldiers we lost in the War on Terror are having their names read aloud. The words never forget actually require action, though. So they require me and you to do something. So take action now. Join Tunnel to Towers on its mission to do good. Donate $11 a month at t2t.org. That's T, the number 2t.org. Guys, it's $11 a month, and it's going to change so many lives. So I'm taking us back to Afghanistan. For many of the people that I know in Afghanistan, many of those that I became very close friends with, Bagram actually became a place where a lot of Afghan people actually got very close to the US troops and forces, especially the medical community. So many wounded Afghanistan civilians, Afghan civilians were flown into Bagram and taken care of. And I'm going to tell you a really quick personal story before I go to Scotty Miller and tell you why that changed the way I saw Afghanistan. It was my first trip to Afghanistan. And as I said, I flew into Bagram first. And so it was, obviously, the first time I'd been in a war zone, and I was young, and it was gut wrenching. It was a little scary too. I mean, I got to tell you the truth. I'm leaving the sanctity and safety of the United States, in going into South Asia, into a war zone. And at that point in time, I mean, there was no like bodyguards or anything. I was a print writer, and I went straight into battle with our troops. So if they were going on, the strikers were going out on Highway 1, I was going in the strikers with them. But I remember covering Bagram Hospital, and I was there, and there was a little girl. She was a little Afghan girl, maybe about 1.5 to 2 years old. The sweetest little thing. She was so beautiful. And she had come in from Wardak province, and she was with her grandfather. And the reason she was there is because during a battle with the Taliban, shrapnel she had been hit by shrapnel, and it was in her throat area. They had to do emergency surgery on this poor little baby, just the sweetest thing. And I remember sitting in the room and asking her grandfather. Now, I'd never met an Afghan man before, I'd never been in the region before. And I remember hearing all these horror stories about the Taliban and the way men treated women and how scary it was. And sure, some of those stories are true. But just like everything, things are over exaggerated, right? And this old man, this old grandfather, he looked at me, and I said, "Do you mind if I sit with your granddaughter?" And the doctor translated. The doctor spoke Pashto, and he said, "Yes, would you?" And I did, and I played with her for maybe about an hour, just having fun, just taking my time, just playing with this little girl. And she couldn't, talk or verbalize anything because of her throat, but she was just happy to see me, I guess, a woman, spending some time with her. And as I got ready to leave, the grandfather actually asked the doctor if I would stay just a little bit longer. And the doctor said, he wants to pray for you. Now, I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I never had a Muslim man pray for me before. And I got tears in my eyes. And he prayed that God would protect me, that no matter where I traveled in Afghanistan, no one would ever harm me, and that I would get home to my family safely. And he said this blessing over me, and it really changed the way I saw the region and people, and the way I felt about telling my stories, right? Taking the time to really get to know those around us, and not just buying what people tell us, but stopping and learning and taking it in and bringing those stories home. Whether that was a soldier, a young soldier, a captain, an intelligence, personnel, or whether it was an Afghan grandfather from Wardak province who probably has family that's in the Taliban, I don't know, but who was fighting for his granddaughter's life at Bagram Airfield. Those are some of the stories that you may never hear. And all of the soldiers, like my husband who was there, and those that I saw, I remember seeing two soldiers, holding each other's hands. They were brutally wounded, laying in the beds, and they were buddies, and one was dying. And this was on that same trip. One of the guys was dying, and his buddy was holding his hand, and he said, "Man, I'm right here for you. I'm not going to let you go. I promise you, I'm not going to let you go." Well, I can promise you this. And as an American, I can promise you this. I'm not going to let this story go. Our soldiers gave so much. Our troops gave so much in Afghanistan. And I'm sorry I say soldiers a lot because my husband was a soldier, but it's troops. It's about all of our troops and what we've given and the sacrifices that our families made over these last 20 years that we can never, ever forget. Now I want you to hear General Scotty Miller. He gets asked, will you feel some responsibility if Afghanistan collapses into a civil war?
As we withdraw the force, we have a set of military orders. There's some military tasks, but I don't want anybody to think that there's also not an emotional piece of this. What we've talked about is you cannot hide the emotional aspect of this, but at the same time we stay very focused on the things we must do in accordance with our orders. You know, our obligations are one, to make sure our force is protected and that we're able to withdraw coalition forces as safely and as orderly as possible, and at the same time ensure that we leave our Afghan security partners in a position that they're able to pick this up and carry it on. And that's, you know, again, an obligation that we feel not just to security forces but also to the people of Afghanistan.
I've got a lot of friends there too, and I know how Scotty Miller feels. You know, the general is speaking from his heart. You can't leave the emotional part out of this. There were many Afghan friends and allies that we all got close to while we were in the region. Some of them will not make it out. Some of them will be left behind. Many of them, I can tell you this from speaking to them, because I do quite often, are terrified that they will lose their life to the Taliban. They are terrified that they will be found out, that they will be targeted because they were interpreters for the United States, because they believed in the United States. And there's a fear that in some ways they say, you know, has the US abandoned us? Were we just used? Were we being used? Do you even care? I think that we need to really think through these actions that we've taken and what's happening right now. And all of those people that gave so much as well of their lives, of their families. And what's happening now is that the Taliban will take Afghanistan. It's over. Anybody who believed that Afghanistan was going to be a democracy, that Afghanistan was going to change, it couldn't. It couldn't because the Taliban was allowed to succeed. Because the idea of winning was somehow convoluted with all of these ideologists, people who had never been in that region, who were making policy here in Washington, who didn't even allow a lot of our generals to fight the fight that they needed to fight to win. And what does that mean? Yeah, war sucks. It is fraught with challenges and convolution and mud, and people die and you can't see through it. And it's horrible. It's horrible. I saw it with my own eyes. And so many other people have seen it too. But what happened in Afghanistan was like we were trying to do something different, build a nation, fight a war, build a nation, fight a war. We confused our soldiers. We confused our troops. We didn't have the same policy. We didn't have goals directed at the right issues. Look how long it took us to get Al-Qaeda, for crying out loud. You know, during the Bush administration, we should have gone over after Tora Bora. We should have told the Pakistanis, you know what? Sorry. We know bin Laden crossed into Pakistan and we're going after him. Try to stop us. Try to stop us. They wouldn't have done anything. It took years later. We had to go in there with our SEAL teams and take him out after finding him, hiding out in Abbottabad, by the way, 2011. Hiding out in Abbottabad, just miles from a Pakistani military academy, one that I had actually visited in 2010, the year before. I had no idea bin Laden was like right down the road. You know, whoa, what about that? I thought actually he was drinking chai somewhere in Islamabad. That was my joke, but the joke, I guess, was on me because he was just literally down the road from the military academy where I was at in Abbottabad. So, you know, we got to think about this. Are we learning from the past? Do we learn from the mistakes that we made? Are we rushing to do something now because we're so exhausted from it without thinking things through? I don't know. I don't have all the answers. But, General Scott Miller, who's been there now for a while and more recently than I have, this is what he had to say about, since he was a soldier on the ground during the events of 9/11, how he feels leaving Afghanistan, knowing that the Taliban is so close to regaining power.
I'm not unique in that sense. There's obviously many nations with many service members that have spent a great deal of time in Afghanistan. And if you ask them what they would like as an outcome, they'd like to see this country come back together and end the decades of violence. But with that thought, make no mistake, there's many of us that just feel an obligation. We are the last rotation, if you will. And as the last rotation, we have an obligation to those that have gone before us. And, it's not just those that are back home. It's those that did not make it back home. And we feel an obligation to them, their sacrifices, their family's sacrifice and continued pain, as well as their friends.
He's right. He's right. Because those are the people, right? Me, the others, are my friend Brian, who died, my husband's best friend, Brian, who died and who we loved dearly, his family that still lives with that. And all those others who've lost their lives, are paying the ultimate sacrifice because they're going to live with that forever. They're buried at Arlington and they're heroes in my book. But guess what? We're all living with their loss. And we all want that loss to mean something. Every time I see my husband and I think what an amazing man he is, and I see him in a new place and he doesn't know his way around it. And I think to myself, he lost his eyes completely. I mean, he can't see a thing. It's like total blackness. But he lost them fighting for this nation because he actually truly believes with all of his heart that this is the greatest nation on earth. This is it, folks. For me, for him, for you, it should be. This is the most precious gift, the most beautiful nation on earth. And anyone else who tells you it's not is lying to you. They are lying to you. There is no place on planet Earth that has a document like our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, that believes in freedom and liberty the way we do. There is no place on earth where people are willing to truly fight for their family's future the way Americans do, because we pride life more than anything. So think about this. We don't pride like death. We're not going to go out there and martyr ourselves like we've seen these extremists do. But we pride life, and we want our families to have a great life, and we want to give that life to our grandchildren and see it go on and see our nation prosper. And we're willing to fight the fight no matter how much we love life. We are willing to go out there and do it in order to ensure that that freedom and that liberty lives on. I just hope the way things are changing in our nation now, I just hope that that does not disappear, that love for our nation does not disappear, because we have enemies waiting, lurking predators out there just waiting, and our adversaries for us to eat each other alive so that they can come in and destroy this great nation. And God help us if they do, because getting this back will not be easy. Will not be easy. You can see it across the globe. It's a battle. How many people are battling for freedom? How many people cross this border daily? Over 2,000 just looking for a better life. Where will they go if this is gone, right? Where will we go? What are we going to do? Pack our bags, go to Canada? That's gone, right? This is a beautiful nation worth living and fighting for. This is Sohail Shaheen. He is a Taliban spokesman, and he's explaining what the Taliban will do if we leave the forces behind and violate the Doha Agreement.
We assure them that there will be no threat to their embassy, to their consulate, while we are telling them that let's close this chapter of bloodshed and destruction and open a new chapter and invest in the reconstruction of Afghanistan. And we are welcome your economic assistance cooperation. So why they are insisting to leave their forces for the embassy, while in our view there is no threat to them, any security threat to them. We assure them, and we are there, that when we are not targeting them, who are another force to target them.
Would there be attacks against any international forces if they are left behind in this country for any purpose?
If they leave behind their forces against the Doha Agreement, then in that case, it will be up to the decision of our leadership.
He's a liar. Suhail Shaheen is lying. They will attack. They have constantly attacked. They've launched attacks on Ghazni. They've launched attacks on areas of Kabul. They've killed thousands of people. They don't care what they do. The Taliban has this pretense of being this very religious, Islamist group that wants to establish an Islamic state. But they don't care. They're about power and attaining power. And by the way, they operate like a criminal organization, and they are terrorists, and they are liars, and they constantly lie. And they have harmed young women, and they have brutalized villages, and they have brutalized the Afghan people, and they have targeted our soldiers. And I wouldn't believe a single word that comes out of Suhail's mouth, who is the spokesman. And I've spent many times talking to the various spokesmen for the Taliban. And every time I talk to them, I know they are lying to me. Unless they're telling me, well, honestly, you know what? They don't lie about one thing. They used to say the exact truth. Right now, they're trying to figure out how they're going to get everyone out, because what they want to do is steamroll Kabul. They want to go into Kabul and they want to take it over. And that's exactly what they're going to do. But before, I would ask them and they would say, we will kill every American until you're out of Afghanistan. That was the truth. I guess that part was the truth. We will kill every American until you are out of Afghanistan. That is our mission. And I was like, okay, straight up. I get where you're coming from. So we know that we're in a war. We realize that right now. And this Taliban spokesperson, they're playing the game because what they want to do is take control of Kabul. And once they have control of Kabul, once they have control of the whole region, that's it. It's over. So then you ask me, what are our lessons learned? What happens now? Where does it go from here? What do we do? What do I say to my friends when they call? And they were stunned that the airbase was emptied, because some of them are still waiting their paperwork to come to the United States. Some of them believed that they would be out by September 11th to get to the U.S. because they spent so much time serving U.S. forces in the region and believed that they would get here. I don't know what to tell them. I don't know what to say. I don't know if they'll make it out. I don't know if they'll survive. I don't know if the Taliban will do what they've done in the past, which is bring everybody into a soccer field and execute them. Those are things that we need to think about. When we make commitments to fight, when we go overseas and we say, you're going to pay the price because you attacked the United States of America, we better make sure that we know what we're doing and we mean what we say. I want you to hear this. This is Scotty Miller, General Scott Miller's reply to, do the Afghans expect this summer to be the bloodiest yet? I actually believe it will be.
They're expecting this summer to be the bloodiest ever.
I haven't heard it described that way. I do expect, and we've seen, a Taliban surge, pressure on different provincial capitals. But we've also, you and I have had this conversation before. This is the time of the Afghan security forces as we move forward. And even as we're retrograding, we are certainly trying to put them in the best possible posture that we are able to.
And that's all he can do, is try to get the Afghan special forces and I guess, military in the best possible posture, it's not going to last because you have to have a functional government. The Afghan government has to be a functional government, and it's not because it's corrupted, unfortunately. And people aren't going to get their checks in the military, and the Afghan security guys, as soon as we're gone, are going to start, there's corruption abound. They're not going to be getting paid. They're going to say, oh, hell no, I am not going to fight the Taliban because they're taking over. And you know what they're going to do? The Afghan soldiers are going to run back to their villages. Some of them are going to flip flop. They're going to say, oh, yeah, you know what? I was only doing this because I needed money for my family. And they're going to flip flop and turn in their friends. And it's just going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be a bloodbath. And then those from Panjshir will head up to the Panjshir Mountains and try to protect their region, and Afghanistan will go back to the way it was. Go back to the way it was. Will it be a safe haven again for terrorists? I don't know. Listen to what General Miller has to say here, the BBC interview.
The Afghan security forces have the capabilities, and they have to hold. That's where we are right now.
They're going to have to hold. They're not going to be able to hold. That's a fact. Right now, Afghan security forces are at Bagram. I don't know if you've seen pictures of this online, but they're taking selfies with the vehicles that we left behind, playing a guitar, looting the place, trying to get stuff to take home. It's over. It's over. We left so much medical equipment. We vacated it. We left, MREs and everything else. We just dumped it all. It's like, I can't even fathom this. I can't even fathom this because I remember being there. I think there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken there too. I mean, in the hospital and everybody working and all the soldiers that went through there. And my husband they did emergency surgery on him. Actually in 2011, after he was wounded on Easter Sunday. They did emergency surgery on my husband there at Bagram Airfield. And now it's just a jumbled mess. We just said, hasta la vista, bye. Good luck. We're out of here. We're out of here. I don't even understand this kind of policy. I don't even understand what this means. I know it's been 20 years, but there's got to be a better way. There has to be. We have to be able to handle things better. It's like what I tell everyone, even when I go on those trips, right, to Guatemala or, and I'm in Central America, and I was just last month talking to President Yamate in Guatemala. There's got to be a better way. We can't be so reactionary. Shouldn't we be on the offensive? We can't just be on the defensive all the time, like right now in Guatemala. Like, why aren't we building strong relations with our neighbors? Why do we wait till everything falls apart in order to do something that's right? And then when we can't get it all fixed up the way we want it, we walk away from it and abandon it. Like some old jalopy, right? That shouldn't be the way we handle foreign policy. Whether that's President Biden, President Trump, or anyone else. We can't be there forever, but we shouldn't handle it like this. And just like General Miller said, we need to remember all of those who made the ultimate sacrifices. Remember, this is about all of us, about our families, about our country, about our nation. And many of you who are millennials or younger don't even remember September 11th. You don't even fathom, how we felt that day. And I pray to God that you never experience that. I pray to God that in your life, it's just filled with peace and that there is no war that drags your family or your loved ones away from home and that sometimes sends them back changed or doesn't bring them back at all. That's what I pray for. I pray for peace in our country, but we can't have peace if we don't understand what it is we are defending. We can't let our nation fall apart. If there is any lesson that Afghanistan has taught us, is that we are a nation worth fighting for and defending. We cannot give up. We have to be proud of our soldiers, of our troops, of the men and women who went over there and sacrificed so much to protect our nation against these extremist terrorist organizations. And believe me, it's not over. It's not over. They are still waiting in the wings, and they have still an intention to target this great nation and other Western societies. So as Afghanistan, the 20-year, America's longest war, wraps up, remember, this is just the beginning of another chapter. One that I hope will be a decade of peace, but one that I fear will be something far worse. To all those men and women who serve our nation, and to all the first responders, and to my wonderful, wonderful husband, thank you so much for everything you do. Thank you so much for serving our country and for willing to make the ultimate sacrifice so that we can live in this great nation. And believe me, for those of us who really understand what it means, we're right there with you. We got your back. We're going to fight for you. And we believe in you. God bless everyone out there. Thank you so much for being a part of the Sara Carter Show. Remember, you can get all your links at saracarter.com. That's saracarter.com. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. That is very important so we don't get shadow banned. Can you believe we're talking about this in America so we don't get shadow banned? It's just crazy. I'm in upside down land. But remember, I'm thinking about you. You're thinking about me. We're thinking about each other, and we love this nation. And as long as we have that, we have something to fight for. Thank you so much, and God bless. Today, I'm joined by Rebecca Weber, the CEO of the Association for Mature American Citizens. It's also known as AMAC. The most important question, I think, for so many people out there is, how much does AMAC membership cost? What does it cost the regular consumer?
Yeah, so for $16 a year, okay, or less, you can join at a 1, 3, or 5 year membership. You get a couple of things. You get the benefits. You get a great subscription to a magazine. So for $16, you're going to receive a bi-monthly magazine. But your voice is now going to be heard in Washington. We take our marching orders from you. If you stand for faith, family, freedom, if you believe in the Constitution, if you believe in the greatness of America, if you believe in individual freedoms and everything you just said, Sara, $16 is not a lot of money to join the 2.3 million members that are really fighting hard to ensure that America remains the best country in the world.
Rebecca, thanks so much for being with me today. I'm honored to have you and AMAC as a sponsor for the Sara Carter Show. You know, for more information, folks, visit amac.us/Carter.